Good evening, sir. A very good evening to all respected faculties and my colleagues. My case for presentation today is one on a defect on the distal one-third of the leg. The patient is a 20-year-old young gentleman who is a manual laborer by profession and resident of Delhi, who presented with a complaint of multiple wounds on the left leg for a duration of the last 3 months. He has with complaints of associated pain, and he has an X-fix in situ. The patient has a history of a road traffic accident which he sustained 3 months ago on the 28th of August. He was hit by a bus while riding a motorcycle from behind, as a result of which he sustained a fall and had an injury to the left leg, wherein the leg was caught between the bus and the motorcycle, grazed along the road for a bit, and upon injury, the patient sustained a fracture with a deformed leg, with the bony end of the fracture projecting out through the wound present in the anterior aspect of the distal third of the leg. There was profuse bleeding on spot, for the management of which the patient was transferred to a local hospital. There was no associated head injury or any other injuries over the body. The primary treatment was undertaken at the local hospital in the form of control of the bleeding, regular dressing, supportive management, antibiotics, and IV fluids, post which he underwent an orthopedic bony stabilization with an X-fix application, which was done on the 29th of August. After that, the patient has had regular dressings done, with which the superficial wounds have healed. And on the 25th of November, the patient was referred to the plastic surgery department for coverage of the wound. This is an image depicting the anterior aspect of the affected leg with the two wounds as shown in the image. On general and systemic examination, the patient is alert, conscious, cooperative, well-built, well-nourished, and had fairly normal vitals, and the systemic examination was within normal limits. The patient has no medical comorbidities or any other history of any surgical interventions. There is no history of any substance abuse. The patient was examined lying down comfortably in the supine position with the knee in a mild flexion and the ankle fixed in the position with the external fixator. Now, on inspection, the patient has a 7 centimeters by 4 centimeters wound on the anterior aspect of the middle one-third of the leg, with a base of healthy granulation tissue and the margin showing healing epithelium with sloping edges. The surrounding skin has a hypopigmented healed scar tissue. There is no surrounding edema or erythema. Another wound is the one on the distal one-third of the leg, which is 5 by 3 centimeters in size. It is an elliptical wound with inverted edges. It has an irregular but well-defined, and the floor of the ulcer is formed by the anterior fractured end of the tibia. The tibia appears to be dry, lustrous, and yellow, devoid of the pericardium. There is also a wound present on the posterior aspect of the leg, spanning the middle and lower one-third of the leg. It is also a 7 by 2 centimeter size elliptical wound, also covered with healthy granulation tissue, and the margins show healing epithelium with sloping edges. The skin on the medial aspect of the leg, above the medial malleolus, shows scar tissue which is healed after the friction burn sustained due to the grazing of the leg along the road. Now, on inspection, when both limbs compared, there is no evidence of any limb length discrepancy. However, the left limb shows slight wasting. There are patchy areas of healed scar with variable pigmentation, along with loss of hair present around the wound extending the middle and the distal one-third of the leg. However, there are no sinuses noted. An ankle spanning external fixator with 6 pins present along the anterior aspect of the tibia, stabilizing the tibia, along with an additional transmetatarsal pin is present. The great toe is plantarflexed. These are images of the wound, the anterior aspect, the medial aspect of the wound, also showing the posterior aspect with the wound mentioned. Again, the posterior aspect of the wound and the lateral aspect of the wound, lateral aspect of the leg with the lateral malleolus and the scar tissue of the wound in the middle one-third of the anterior aspect of the leg extending up to the peroneal aspect of the leg. On palpation, the margins of the wounds were tender, the skin overlying the limb is normal in temperature. All inspectory findings were confirmed. The length and circumference of both the limbs were measured from fixed bony points and were essentially equal bilaterally. On palpation, we have confirmed the dimensions of the wound on the anterior aspect of the distal 1/3 of the leg, which is 5 by 3 centimeters in size, and the base of which is formed by the exposed tibia, which is 3 by 3 centimeters in size. The wound extends proximally 30 centimeters below the tibial tuberosity, while the distal margin of the wound is at 36 centimeters below the tibial tuberosity, extending up to the bimalleolar line. Laterally, the wound is present in the midline at a distance of 3 centimeters from the medial as well as the lateral malleolus, and there was no evidence of any slough or discharge from the wound. On examination of the movements, passive and active movements of the hip are normal. The knee had a restricted range of motion due to pain. The ankle was immobilized due to the X6 in situ. The great toe had no active extension, and rest all toes showed normal plantar and dorsiflexion. The capillary refill time in all the toes was normal. The posterior tibial artery and the dorsalis pedis artery is palpable. However, the anterior tibial artery could not be palpated. Also, on compression over the posterior tibial artery, the flow in the dorsalis pedis is diminished. Sensations over the foot were essentially normal. There was no enlargement of any lymph nodes in the groin, and the right lower limb appears essentially normal. I have also examined the donor sites which could be required for the coverage of our defect. The medial and lateral aspect of the lower 1/3 of the left leg appears scarred. However, the posterior aspect of while the posterior aspect of the right leg is normal, and both the thighs are normal. So, on the basis of the above findings, my diagnosis is a 3-month-old post-traumatic composite soft tissue defect over the anterior aspect of the distal 1/3 of the left leg with an exposed tibia, with probable anterior tibial artery injury and an injury to the extensor hallucis longus tendon with no neurological deficit, and a post-operative status of tibia stabilization with an external fixator.
Dr. Isha, is it? Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So can you give us a comment on the bone, please?
So the X-rays, the preoperative X-ray has a fracture on the mid-shaft of the tibia with a multiple segmental fibular fracture, along with the presence of a butterfly fragment and an extra-articular distal tibia fibula fracture. And after stabilization with the X6 application, we can see that the fracture segments are well aligned. So these are the X-rays we have been provided.
Okay. Yeah. So, so the X-rays have been done. Have you? So how will you proceed? Just tell me. So I'll leave you to present. Yeah.
Yes. So in order to further proceed with my case, I would like to investigate. Sir, I would like to get done definitive investigations as well as investigations with respect to the preoperative fitness of the patient. For the definitive investigation, I would like to do a vascular assessment of the limb with the help of a Doppler, color Doppler, or a CT angio would be preferable. Get a wound swab as well as wound swab and take culture sensitivity reports of the same. And remaining, sir, investigations for blood workup, viral markers, and others for fitness of the patient. While we await fitness of the patient and other reports, we would like to debride the bone, debride the wound margins, and start the patient on appropriate antibiotics as per the wound culture report. Followed by which we would like to, sir, go for the definitive management of the coverage of the wound. Sir, given the scarring on the medial as well as lateral aspect of the leg, my first plan of management would be a microvascular free tissue transfer. I have two options, an anterolateral thigh flap or a gracilis muscle flap, which could be used with an anastomosis, with an end to side anastomosis done in the lower third of the with the posterior tibial artery. Hello.
Hello.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So your first plan is the microvascular transfer. Plan. What is plan B?
Plan B would be, sir, a cross-legged flap. In which case, we could plan either a posterior tibial artery perforator-based, based retrocutaneous cross-leg flap, or a conventional cross-leg flap, which is anteromedially placed, along with an external fixator applied for the positioning and immobilization of the limb.
And plan D, you have written plan D. I'm sorry. I think that is plan C. What you mean? Okay, that is conservative management, debridement of devitalized bone and VAC application, is it? So this is your plan of management.
Yes, sir.
So plan A is a microvascular tissue transfer. Plan B is a cross-leg flap, and plan C is conservative. Have I summarized it correctly?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Okay. Right. Okay. Before you embark on the plan, no, would you consult an orthopedic? Have you consulted your orthopedic colleague? What is the plan for the bone? Or let me word it differently. What is the aim of your treatment? What is the end point of your treatment?
So to allow the patient weight, to allow the patient to bear weight and
yeah, independent painless weight bearing mobilization. Yes. Correct.
Yes.
Okay. So it's not just about flapping that area. Okay. So in your inspectory findings, what was your comment on the tibia?
The tibia appears devitalized, probably non-viable. The part of which that is exposed appears non-viable. However, I would like to get a recent X-ray done to look for the current status of the bone.
No, will an X-ray tell you about devitalization and vitalization?
So a CT scan would be a better option to look for the.
No. I think you're performing suicide now. You're starting to. You're seeing it with your eyes, right? You told me it was devitalized. Then why do you want to X-ray and CT scan and all?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I take your word for it. You told me it was devitalized. Obviously, you can all make out devitalized bone. Would you like to go ahead with a flap cover over a devitalized bone?
No, sir. We'd like to debride the bone primarily.
Good.
Debride the devitalized bone.
Okay, yeah. So the first thing that you would do is take off the X-fix. Correct? Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so the first thing would be to talk to your orthopedic colleague. So the first point you need to is to talk to your orthopedic colleague and manage the bone, because if you flap dead bone, it's going to finish off your flap. Whatever flap you do is going to fail. Okay.
Yes.
So most probably you would. So if you're going to talk to your orthopedic colleague, what are the points you're going to ask him about? Okay, let me put it to you this way. Are you going to talk to him about resecting bone? Are you going to talk to him about resiting the X-fix? Are you going to talk to him about the type of fixation? So what would you talk to him about?
So I would like to talk to them about, sir, all the three things. First is regarding the status of the bone, whether they would like to remove the bone, and if at all there is a long segment bone osteomyelitis, or the bone appears non-viable, if they would want to go ahead and remove the bone, and depending on the segment of the bone that is affected, whether they would want to go for a bone graft or a masculate.
Okay. I'm your orthopedic colleague here. Okay, I'm going to tell you, we are going to remove the entire 10 centimeter of distal tibia.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Now what will you do?
Sir, in that case, we would need to reconstruct the tibial gap with a vascularized bone. A preferable option for which could be a vascular fibula, sir.
Yeah, if that is going to be your vascularized fibula, will you still would you still go ahead with this anterolateral thigh flap and all those plans?
Sir, if we're going with a vascularized fibula, then we wouldn't need to, sir, do all of this, because the bone is anyways the tibia which is exposed is what we need to cover right now with these flaps. So that would anyways be removed. And
Isha, yeah. So actually,
the fibula would need to be taken from the contralateral limb.
Yeah, okay, fine. The point I wanted to make here is never make a plan to cover dead exposed bone.
Yes,
okay,
sir.
the first point you need to do is you need to always tell them, please, I will request my orthopedic colleagues to join me in debriding all the dead and devitalized tissue from there. Never cover dead and devitalized tissue in hoping to get a good flap cover. It will never happen. It will always come out. Okay. So once you have debrided the bone, then I will reassess the defect and see whether that limb is salvageable. Because the distal end of tibia, if it is lost, usually orthopedics says that it is very difficult to reconstruct either by bone transport or by free fibula reconstruction. It is free fibula usually works well when there is an intercalated segment. That is, there are two ends of bone and you put a fibula in the middle, not when you put a fibula into a joint. Okay.
Yes, sir.
So you might this reconstruction might go another way, but for sake of discussion, just let's leave that alone. And okay, so if let's assume that the bone was okay, and now we are going on to microvascular free tissue transfer. Okay, so would you prefer, if there was a bone gap of 2 centimeter, which would require later bone grafting, what type of flap would you prefer among anterolateral thigh flap and gracilis muscle flap? And your defect, you said your defect was 5 into 3 centimeters or so, right?
Yes, sir. The defect was 5 by 3 centimeters, which hopefully after debridement would be a 6 by 4 centimeters defect.
So 6 by 4 centimeter, would you still go ahead with an anterolateral thigh flap?
No, sir. I would prefer a gracilis in that case.
Okay. So what is the problem if you see you have a segmental tibial defect there? Okay. So what do you think is the problem if you decide on a gracilis flap? Where would be your pedicle? At what level do you think your pedicle would be there? And would you take a venous Doppler to rule out anything else if you're planning on a microvascular tissue transfer? It's a 3-month-old injury. The patient has been bedridden for 3 months. So what else would you do?
So I would like to get a CT angio done.
No, you would like to roll out a DVT. Deep veins. You need to look at the status of the
deep venous system.
Okay, yeah. You need to look at the status of the venous outflow if you're going to do a microvascular free tissue transfer. And particularly when it is a segmental fracture, and you say that there is no flow in the anterior tibial, you need to find out the level of the anterior tibial cutoff. And if you have the level, if there is a mid shaft fracture of the tibia also. So if it is injured at that level, then planning a gracilis flap, you would see that the business end of the flap is actually very, very, very distal. So you need a longer pedicle. Okay. So that is one point that you need to note. Okay.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Now, suppose you see that the anterior tibial has been cut off in the upper third. There is a single vessel lower limb, no veins or DVT, which takes off the microvascular free tissue transfer plan. You would go to the plan B, right? Which is your cross-leg transfer. So in that position, with the limb in the current state, viable bone, exfix on the medial side, what would you request your orthopedic colleague to do?
The repositioning of the X-fix on the lateral aspect so that we could
Yes. Okay.
so that we could
You would
position
request
the
him- Yeah. Yes.
yes, sir, so that we could position the limb properly and have an additional X-fix applied on the donor limb to fix it with the existing external fixator, reposition the external fixator.
External fixator. Okay, right. Okay. Since this is a distal defect, what position would you place the affected leg, and where exactly would you plant the cross leg flap?
So since this is the distal defect, sir, we could plan inferiorly or distally based, sir, we could take it from the posterior tibial artery perforator based, distally based fasciocutaneous cross leg flap.
Okay.
And sir, with the knee in flexion and having the knee flexed and externally rotated, and
Knee externally rotated? Are you sure you want external rotation there? Because your defect is going to then move away from the opposite leg. You would want just knee flexion. You don't
knee
want
flexion,
external
just
rotation.
yes.
Yeah, knee flexion.
Just
You don't
knee
want
flexion.
external rotation. Yeah.
Yes, sir. Just flex the knee, bring it close to the recipient limb, and have it fixed via an external fixator, which could be applied on the mid shaft of the tibia, and connected to the existing external fixator, and then give the inset of the flap to the.
Yeah, that is for a medially based flap, right?
Yes, sir, medially based flap.
Okay, right. Yeah. And plan C, I would actually advise you to just forget about plan C, because if you're going to take off devitalized bone and graft it there, there is actually no point doing that.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Never give an option like that. Because please remember, wound healing is not your aim. Your aim is independent weight bearing walking.
Painless weight bearing.
Yeah. Now I leave the stage to Patacharya sir. I think he will proceed with.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much.
Well, let me ask you a few basic questions. Why the tibia got devitalized?
So because it has been exposed for a very long duration of time without any vascularized coverage.
So what is the vascularity of tibia? Vascular system associated with tibia. What are the vascular systems?
So the tibia has an endosteal and a periosteal blood supply. In the proximal part, the endosteal supply is obtained via the posterior tibial artery, while the periosteal supply is via multiple segmental branches from the anterior tibial artery. And so the distal part of the tibia gets supply from several anastomoses between the peroneal and the posterior tibial artery, sir.
What are the importance of nutrient vessels?
Sir, the nutrient vessel supplies, sir, it gives the endosteal supply to the.
So is it endosteal is a separate issue and nutrient is a separate issue, or they're same?
So same, sir.
No, there's three separate systems. Okay. Suppose on this basis, this patient has been waiting for 3 months. And that is why all this happened.
Yes,
bone
sir.
got fixed, but bone got necrosed also, devitalized also. Suppose you are called on day 1. What would have been your approach? Orthopedic team is there and you are also there. Then this morbidity could have been much reduced to the patient.
Yes, sir.
What would have been your approach?
Sir, on day 1, we could have looked for primarily where the anterior tibial artery cutoff is present, and an end-to-end anastomosis, or if required with an interpositional vein graft, we could have done a vascular anastomosis and preserved the vascularity to the.
Do you think that the bone is devitalized because of the discontinuity of the anterior tibial artery only?
No,
Would you
sir. Because of the loss of a.
Would you not like to cover the bone at the same sitting?
Yes,
Let
sir.
me put-
Cover the bone at the same sitting when the external fixator is applied. Sir,
Whether
at that time.
whether anti-tibial is there or discontinued, isn't it?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
So on day one, what will be the sequence of events? You will do the flap first, or the orthopedic surgeons will do the bone fixation first? You have to talk to them.
They would
You
do
have
the
to take a-
bone fixation first, after which we would do the flap coverage, sir.
While they are doing the bone fixation, how will you caution them? You have to caution them to be very practical.
So to not apply any of their external fixators, as in the rods which they're applying in any of the regions of possible donor sites, so that the donor, the possibility of the perforators in the donor sites are not damaged.
What about a single vessel limb? Will you caution them regarding a single vessel limb?
Yes, sir.
Yes. Okay.
Yes, sir.
Because sometimes they're X-fixed, no? They might not see it, and they might damage the posterior tibial artery also.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
So you mentioned about the utility of the color Doppler. You said
Yes,
you will
sir.
do a color Doppler. What are the things you see in color Doppler?
So the flow of the vessels, the peak systolic velocity.
Which velocity?
As well
Which
as
vessel?
so the peak systolic velocity in the vessels, as well as whether the
Vessel
flow
means
is
main vascular trunk. Vessels mean main vascular trunk.
yes, sir, the main vascular trunk.
Okay. What else you see?
So whether the flow is a monophasic, a bi, or a triphasic flow.
Okay. So flow in the main vascular trunk. One. What else?
Yes, sir. So we could look for the possible perforators, if any perforators are intact or not.
So when you look for the perforator, what you see in the colored Doppler?
So I'm not sure, sir.
Right. So you see four things. I'll answer to it.
Yes, sir.
One is the site of the perforator. That means from a fixed bony landmark.
Yes.
Then you see the interperforator distance. Then you see the direction of the perforator.
Yes.
Fourth is the length of the perforator.
Right.
And number 5 is the internal diameter of the perforator. So color Doppler gives you 5 informations. It is an important tool, but you must know what are the things you would like to see, because depending upon the visualization and the internal diameter measurement, the perfusion will depend upon that. The perfusion pressure through that perforator. If it's a small diameter, then it will have less perfusion pressure. If it's a large perforator, so that will indirectly give you an idea regarding the dimension of a safe flap. If you are using a local flap, loco-regional flap.
Yes.
So these are the things which you see, and of course, CT angiography will give you the whole vascular tree of the lower limb.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
So I think the cross-leg flap in this situation, cross-leg flap will be the safer option.
Idea. Safer idea.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I wouldn't have microvascular surgery as an option in this case unless we have no other option. So cross-leg flap is the first option. And as far as I think, that is the only option that is available in this, because if you need to put a free fibula later, you need to have a vascular pedicle for later reconstruction also, if possible.
Second thing is that when you,
yes. And
When
since it is
when you do inferiorly based cross-leg flap, that gives you more mobility.
Yes, sir.
And second thing is that since you are harvesting the flap from the proximal calf area, which is a large dimension area, wider area, so you can cover a larger defect.
Defect.
And so you have a good mobility and larger dimension.
Yes, sir.
And that gives you additional advantage of playing with the flap. And so that if your fixation has problem, then if you have a long pedicle inferiorly based, that will give you a very easy reach of the flap to the defect.
Yes, sir.
okay. And cross-leg flap. When you do a cross-leg flap, what are the precautions that you will take in positioning the patient? What are the problems that you expect?
So one is the
Post-operatively.
positioning post-operative. Yes, sir.
Post-operatively. Post-operative care
So,
of the patient.
yes.
What are the problems you're going to expect in post-operative care of a cross-leg flap with the patient having an X-fix, immobilizing both feet, leaving the knees free?
Yes, sir. So one is the positioning of the positioning and immobilizing of the patient, which will be uncomfortable for the patient per se. Secondly, sir, it should not be a position such that there is any pressure sores that develop to the patient on the heels. Thirdly, sir, the bridge of the flap should be relatively small, just adequate to what is needed for the insetting of the flap, so that there is no so that basically, sir, the flap is not flimsy. The bridge should be just adequate. And sir, if possible, we could also graft the undersurface of the flap. And
okay, so one you said was pressure sores. Okay, so what are the common areas of pressure sores in cross-leg flaps?
sir, the heel.
Yeah. And
sir, sometimes there could be trochanteric sores if the patient is positioned.
In cross-leg flap, trochanteric? Are you sure?
Sir, primarily the heel, sir.
Yeah, heel and sacrum. Sacrum particularly, patient is not able to flex the knee, because if in a cross-leg flap, even if the patient has one leg knee flex, the other leg won't come up, because these are relative. The other leg knee has to be straight, right? So if the patient cannot flex the knee in any problem, in any bilateral lower limb pathology or a treatment problem where you have fixed knees, the patient cannot flex. The patient is very prone for sacral pressure sores. Okay, that is one problem. Yes. More important problem is the patient needs an attender, very good attender, because he has to pass motion and go for urine frequently, for which he needs bedpans. So you need to actually turn him, and then you need to teach the attender how to use bedpans. Okay, because he cannot lift his hip off the ground, off the bed. Okay, that is one point about pressure sores. So you really, if possible, if facilities are available, if the patient is affordable, you can always put them on airbed, at least for the initial few days. Alternating pressure air mattress. The water beds, they don't work as far as pressure sores are concerned, because as you see, what is the difference between a gas and a liquid as far as physics is concerned? Why do water beds not work and air beds work? From lower limb reconstruction, I've dragged you into pressure sores.
Not sure, sir.
Yeah, see, the basic physics is liquids are not compressible. So whenever, see, a lot of times we see glove bags being put under the heel, or water beds. These patients usually they don't serve the purpose, because in any water filled apparatus, if you underfill it, it is going to bottom out. See, suppose you need the pressure here, it will just bottom out and all the water will get displaced to the sides. But if you overfill it, it becomes hard. Okay, so then it doesn't serve the purpose either way. So that is why always alternating pressure air mattresses are preferable to water beds or any other glove filled water bags or anything. They don't actually work. So you always advise alternating pressure air mattresses when you have a patient on cross leg flaps, at least for the initial few days till the patient becomes able to turn on either side. So at least you must take care of the initial days. Okay.
Yes.
Then sir, is there any other point you would like to make, sir?
I think that's sufficient.
Okay. we have reached 7:30. We are 2 hours now. Madam, do we have time, madam? I think Isha is also done.
Sir, I had one question, sir.
Yeah, sure.
Sir, is a peroneus brevis muscle flap an option in this case? Sir, I know the peroneal aspect is injured and the fibula is also segmentally fractured, but sir, even then, is the peroneus brevis muscle flap an option? And sir, how do we assess whether, sir, because for that there is no way for us to assess preoperatively whether we could do it or not.
So peroneus brevis muscle flap, you in such distal defects, you always have to take it as a reverse flap. You have a reverse flow flap. Okay, so it's going to be a distally based flap. A distally based peroneus brevis flap is a very hypovascular flap. In this condition, I would not prefer to put a peroneus brevis flap on a devitalized bone on an infected area, because any hypovascular flap you put on an infected area is going to necrose, because subflap infection is what usually takes away local flap. Because whenever you put any local flap is relatively a hypovascular flap. Please understand that concept first. So any local flap you put on an infected area, because there is a choke flow, there is a bottleneck flow. It can only increase so much. That is why you do the delay phenomenon, to increase the amount of flow into the flap. If you take a non-delayed local flap and put it on an infected area, be sure that you're going to lose at least the distal third to distal fourth of the flap. That is because subflap infection increases the demand of the flap on the business end, which is not going to be adequately compensated by dilatation of the perforators.
Yes.
So, and in a very hypovascular flap like peroneus brevis, I would absolutely not even have that option in mind when I look at such an infected raw area. Particularly the peroneus brevis, as if you take it as a reverse flap, it can cover a very small area, and it is usually not, the business end of the flap is not very reliable. It is a good flap, but it is good for long narrow defects rather than a circular defect.
And if the distal part of the flap necroses, that is the most significant area which needs to be covered.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
So,
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Did you have any other options in mind, Dr. Isha? If you have, this is the time to ask questions, and this is the time to make mistakes.
Yes, sir. So the peroneus brevis muscle flap was a flap I had in mind.
Okay.
And so that was that. And sir, apart from that, between deciding for a microvascular free tissue transfer, not if they're not particularly in this case, in a distal 1/3 leg defect, sir, between an ALT and a gracilis, which would be a better option to choose? Provided, sir, we have to do, say, an anastomosis on the posterior tibial artery in the lower one.
Okay, so for the distinction between a gracilis and an ALT is the ability of the ALT to allow a more a more radical amount of orthopedic intervention at a subsequent date. So if you need more, if you think that the bone underneath requires a lot of orthopedic intervention, it's safer to go with an ALT. It can be raised and resutured. But if you think that is only going to be a single orthopedic procedure like a bone grafting, or there needs to be no orthopedic procedure, then a gracilis muscle flap is always safer. It's easier, in fact. Okay.
Yes.
And if there is a cavity, it's easier.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
The type of flap always depends on the subsequent orthopedic intervention that is required. If they need to put a plate, for example, you're doing an upper third tibia, middle third tibia, where they need to put a plate you put a gracilis, they'll find it difficult to raise it, and then resuturing will become a problem. So in that case, if you think that you need to take a gracilis, please take it with a skin island, so that the skin island can be used to suture and raise the flap. Okay.
Right, sir. Okay. Yes, sir.
The only problem with the gracilis skin island is it is reliable only in the upper third. The gracilis skin island, you cannot take it wherever you want to take it. You can only take it in the upper third.
Upper third. Yes, sir.
Yeah. Okay. That is where the tug flap is, no?
Yes.
When you raise the gracilis, you will exactly see a perforator going right correctly in the upper third, just above the pedicle. One of the branches from the pedicle goes into the skin.
Yes.
Okay. So cross leg flap, and personally, I think that this patient would do better with an amputation, a Belloni amputation, considering the segmental fracture, the distal tibial bone loss. If I don't know what is, I have not seen the patient exactly, but if you go ahead, allow orthopedics to debride, you might find that this patient has no bone. It's a defect that very difficult to reconstruct, considering that the circumferential tissue injury or soft tissue injury also is there with bone loss, with no local flap options and a single vessel limb. So it might go for Belloni amputation also. This is not for discussion. This is just for your knowledge.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Okay.
Madam, any thoughts, madam? Madam, your thoughts?
Oh, in presence of multiple level fibula fracture, do you recommend if it is a defect is a small peroneus brevis muscle flap?
That was for Isha, madam, or?
No, I am asking you, sir.
Me, you can, madam. If you go ahead, open it and see, because it's only going to be a distal third. If it's a multiple segmental also, if you find, explore, if you see the perforator is good, you can go ahead and take it. Since 3 months is enough time to recover, there might be some flow. You can attempt it because you don't lose anything by taking
it. There. So, is it advisable to say the student to give preference of?
No, madam. As a student, I would not for such a defect. I would not say peroneus brevis at all.
Yes.
I would only say peroneus brevis only in lateral malleolar defect. Just a small lateral malleolar defect is the only place I would safely say, particularly in an exam.
Yes.
And particularly if you have not seen peroneus brevis, please don't say peroneus brevis.
And one,
Isha, have you?
This bone is fixed with X-fix. Why do you expect such a long bone loss in this case, sir?
Madam, because of the segmental fracture, madam. Segmental fracture and the infection, there might be an intramedullary infection. That's all. That's why I don't know.
Soft tissue.
Once orthopedic starts debriding, only then we'll know exactly. Or it might be only the butterfly segment that comes out, and the rest of the bone might be exactly okay.
But the fractures were fixed immediately, and the wounds healed with conservative treatment. Only deep wounds which are there.
The bone exposure for a long period. I was just telling her to be careful. That's all. I'm not.
There is
that is when the patient comes. We also need to counsel them that it may go to this option, because we always we should just warn the patient that if we find before taking them for debridement, finally after debridement, they shouldn't blame you that you took away such a big bone. That is why we went for amputation. So that in private practice at least. Yes.
I thank both of you, Dr. Bhattacharya sir and Dr. Madhu, for a wonderful lecture and followed by the case discussion. And I thank Isha also for presenting nicely the case and answering well, and all the participants. I think Dr. Madhu's lecture on mechanics will definitely enlighten everybody that there is a role for a plastic surgeon to intervene and take the field of reconstruction in diabetic foots and apply the biomechanics in treating the foot and ankle defects. I thank everyone.
And there are a few hands raised, madam. If anybody wants to, any questions on the chat box, madam. Dharmil.
There is.
Yeah, good evening, sir. This is
Yes.
Dr. Dharmil.
Yes, Dharmil.
I could not.
Sir, first of all, thank you for an elaborate presentation. My question in this patient, sir, especially we know that the reconstruction of the defects in the lower 1/3 of the leg and the foot are quite difficult at times. From exam point of view, are we supposed to mention a pedicle flap reconstruction option first and then a free microvascular transfer? Or based on the patient, we can modify the first option as the free microvascular transfer?
Free microvascular transfers. First, one thing I would tell is always tell only what you do at your institute. That is the best way to answer.
Okay, sir.
Don't go by any protocol.
Okay,
There
sir.
is no the reconstructive ladder is actually presently right now it is reconstructive supermarket. Doctor, you have you read the paper by Dr. Hari?
No, sir, I'm
Yeah,
afraid not, sir.
Yeah, don't
Actually,
worry.
sir,
Share it to
yeah.
Madam can share it on the group. So it's right now it has gone to reconstructive escalator. Then now it is a reconstructive supermarket. So you go walk into the supermarket, pick up whatever you think is the best for your defect and use that. Okay. So
Okay, sir.
or you tell what is the protocol in your institute. That is also acceptable. But please don't go by any fixed protocol of you don't try to predict what the examiner expects and don't do anything like that.
Okay, sir. Okay, sir. And sir,
So,
one more question regarding that.
I think
One more question.
Bhattacharya sir will tell you why not to do a free local flap in that area.
Okay, sir.
No, once you do the color Doppler and once you are very sure, then only you should do the local flap. Otherwise, as Dr. Madhu has said, you try to think about the resurfacing the defect by a method which you have seen, which you have assisted, which you have done in your institute. Because ultimately your teacher is going to defend you in the exam also. So that is also equally important. And not that in days of free flap, every time you have to say free flap. Whatever you feel is the most suitable and most safe for the patient. It may be a cross-leg flap in 2 stages, doesn't matter. But ultimately, if it is more safe, you do that because you see the surrounding area where you will be inserting the, say, cross-leg flap. If you can insert a cross-leg flap to 60 to 70% and cover the defect as it is, I think that is a much safer procedure. Yeah.
I agree, absolutely agree with that. For today's discussion, the first choice would be a cross-leg flap. It's not microvascular flap.
Okay, sir.
In this case. Yeah.
Okay, sir. So one more question regarding the presentation, sir. Sir, whenever we reconstruct the plantar aspect of the foot, sir, what is preferred? Whether like if I'm putting a flap cover, a fasciocutaneous flap versus a muscle flap over like SSG over a muscle flap, which is more preferable, sir? Like if you're doing a free flap, either a fasciocutaneous flap is preferred or a free muscle flap and putting SSG over the muscle flap, sir.
As far as if you're reconstructing the hind foot, the thinnest flap is always preferable, which is always a gracilis with an SSG. That is because the gracilis atrophies very well. Okay. If you're reconstructing the forefoot, I would put a fasciocutaneous flap because it is more durable. Because I don't have, if you don't have any other option. Okay. But if you're reconstructing the entire foot, for example, the entire plantar surface and it's a total foot degloving, then you don't have an option except the LD with an SSG. It all depends on the defect and your purpose. Okay.
Okay, sir. Thank you, sir.
For example, for diabetic feet, when we put flaps on the forefoot, plantar surface of the forefoot, we go through the first metatarsal. But see, don't this and all I'm just telling you because you asked. Okay, we always prefer to use a ALT with a long pedicle anastomosed to the dorsalis pedis. But if we put it on the hind foot, on the calcaneal area, we always prefer a gracilis with an SSG.
Okay.
But if that is only if the defect is of a larger size than 5 to 6 centimeters square. Okay. If it is smaller, we always
Okay.
prefer a local glabrous skin flap, which is the flap of choice on the plantar surface of the foot.
Okay, sir. Thank you, sir. Thank you so much, sir.
There is a question in chat box, Aditya Nathan. Can we use an LD flap instead of an ALT flap as done as per Godina's surgery nowadays, or is ALT is preferred?
For which defect, madam? I think I've answered the question already. Yes,
Yes.
it has been already answered. It all depends on the size of that defect and your later orthopedic need for later orthopedic reconstruction.
Yes.
Yes.
All our others are compliments, no queries.
I must personally thank Bhattacharya sir for moderating today's session, sir. You for overseeing today's discussion, because it is an honor for me also to sit in front of you and present my work in front of you, sir. Thank you very much, sir.
It was an
Madam, for giving me the opportunity.
It was an excellent presentation. In fact, I have also learned a lot of things from your presentation.
Sir, humbly thank you, sir. Very humbly thank you, sir.
Thank you. I just revised my,
Yes.
whatever knowledge I have. Yes. Very well presented, and you have put, again I repeat, you have put a lot of effort to explain it.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, madam.
Okay, sir. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you. Well presented, Isha. Do well. Thank you.